Hi, welcome back to English with Miss English. Today we're going to continue talking about linear versus non-linear plot developments. And as you know, we've discussed linear plot developments are when it's just like cause to effect, it focuses on the same story within the present tense, where non-linear kind of drifts away a little bit with like going back and forth in time with foreshadowing and flashbacks, and it also changes plots a little bit, focusing on parallel plots or subplots. And instead of just describing these things and talking about the difference between these two again, I want to talk about why these things are important. Why would the author bother to do nonlinear? Because that's really, really hard. And linear is a little bit easier to do. So, to talk about the difference, I want to give you examples. I know we've talked about examples before, but this is just a little bit easier. First, I want to talk about the book we've been reading, My Hero Academia. This manga has been really great, and so I'm going to give you a little excerpt. Where we were before, Bakugo had just been attacked by that weird slime monster, Izuku had no powers but rushed in anyway, and Bakugo had just yelled at him for saving him, because Bakugo is crazy. And where we are is All Might, Izuku's hero, like actual superhero, but Izuku always looked up to him, wanted to be like him. He comes into the scene and is talking to Izuku. And it starts with him just like rushing in, and he's like, ha ha ha. And Izuku's just like, All Might, why are you here? We're surrounded by reporters. And All Might's just like, shaking them off is nothing to me. After all, I am All Might. And then he coughs and transforms into his much skinnier version. And Izuku is just like, that's weird. And he's like, hey kid, I've come to thank you and revise what I said earlier. I also have a proposal. And Izuku's just like, what? And so All Might says, without you, if I hadn't heard your story, I'd have been nothing but fake muscles and insincerity. So thank you. And Izuku thinks to himself, fake muscles? And then he says out loud, no. I mean, it was all my fault from the start. I got in your way, even though I'm quirkless, powerless, as we've discussed. I dared to ask if, and then All Might interrupts him and he says, exactly. Of all the people at the scene, it was only you, timid and quirkless, who acted. You spurred me to action. Most of the top heroes show signs of greatness, even as children. Many of them claim that, and Izuku, as you'll see later in the manga, he begins to cry. This is a very normal thing for him. And his heart is thumping. And All Might continues to say, their bodies simply moved before they could think. And this is when Izuku thinks to himself, for some reason, I remembered what my mom said. And it flashes back to this scene. If you'll remember from earlier in the manga, when Izuku learned that he was completely powerless, when the doctor told him there's no chance of him getting quirks or superpowers, and his mom comes in and she's apologizing to him, saying, I'm so sorry, Izuku, I'm so sorry. And Izuku is just like, I just want it to be like All Might, he's my favorite superhero of all time. And his mom is just like, I'm so sorry, Izuku. And there's this weird thing, and I don't know if it stuck out to you at the time, but it stuck out to me. When Izuku in that moment says, no mom, back then what I wanted you to say was ... and then it just continued with the story earlier in the manga, this is where it kind of comes back to it. And it says, as All Might is telling Izuku this, All Might says, that's what happened to you back there, yes? The moving without thinking. And Izuku like cries out yes. And it alludes back to that moment when he says, no mom, no. Back then what I wanted you to say was ... We finally get to hear the end of that. And it's All Might, his personal hero, telling Izuku as he's crying, bending over, crying, saying, you can become a hero. And that's when Izuku says, fantasy became reality. I forgot to mention this, but this is the story of how I became a great hero. That is a wonderful example of foreshadowing and flashing back. Foreshadowing earlier in the story and flashing back later. to complete that foreshadow. So let's kind of talk about this. So what happens here is a flashback. It flashes back to him saying All Might was his favorite superhero. And it also flashes back to that really important, that ... His mom saying, I'm sorry, and him saying, no, Mom, what I wanted you to say was ... So, that was a really crazy, complicated flashback and foreshadow. Why in the world would the author choose to do that? He could have easily just had All Might tell him, you too can become a hero, without having that whole flashback, right? Well, that could have happened, but it would have been a much less impactful moment. I mean, we saw Izuku actually bending over crying, and if we didn't have that flashback to what had happened, we wouldn't have understood why is he crying? It's good news. Why does he look so sad and so broken in that scene? But now we get it, because he flashed back and he let us know what was happening. The author did. Now I want to compare that to another one of my favorite books. A book we're not reading for class, but I'm sure many of you are familiar with. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer, or my copy is The Philosopher's Stone, the right copy. Ugh. And I'm going to compare that kind of similarly. We know how Izuku is learning he can become a hero. I'm going to talk about that moment when Harry learns that he's a wizard. That's a pretty crazy moment, right? So, in chapter 4, Hagrid has come through the door, and he's just bombarding all over the place. He's this giant dude. Harry has no idea what's going on, and I'm going to start on page 54. Not that you have a copy of it. But Hagrid is just you don't know what you are, he said finally, and Uncle Vernon suddenly found his voice. He had been having a hard time speaking up until now. He said, "Stop," he commanded. "Stop right there, sir. I forbid you to tell the boy anything." A braver man than Vernon Dursley would have quailed under the furious look Hagrid now gave him. When Harry spoke, his every syllable trembled with rage. "You never told him? You never told him what was in the letter Dumbledore left for him? I was there. I saw Dumbledore leave it, Dursley, and you've kept it from him all these years?" "Kept what from me?" Harry said eagerly. "Stop! I forbid you!" yelled Uncle Vernon in panic. Aunt Petunia gave a gasp of horror. "I'll go boil your heads, both of you," said Hagrid. "Harry, you're a wizard." There was a silence inside the hut. Only the sea and the whistling wind could be heard. "I'm a what?" gasped Harry. "A wizard, of course," said Hagrid, sitting down on the sofa, which groaned and sank even lower. "And it's something good, and I'd say, once you've been trained up a bit. With a mom and dad like yours, what else could you be? And I reckon it's about time you read your letter." I'm going to put a pause there, otherwise I could read this whole book for hours and hours. So, the difference between these, as we know, is linear versus nonlinear. So, this is pretty cause to effect, right? Things just happen, Hagrid just comes in, it's all in the present tense. And yeah, there's a little bit of foreshadowing, what with the chapters before, with all of the crazy snake in the zoo thing that happened and the letters that came in. But most of the time, Harry just doesn't know what's going on. And so it's just cause to effect, same story, same thing. There's no jumping back in time or even changing plot lines at all. These are pretty different. And that was pretty impactful too, right? I mean, if you're a Harry Potter fan like I am, you remember that moment when Hagrid says, "You're a wizard," and Harry's like, "I'm a what?" That's a crazy good scene, and it was really well written. J.K. Rowling did a wonderful job. So why bother with the nonlinear? Why make it more complicated? Well, depends on the story. I mean, even if you think about it, Harry Potter's wasn't a perfectly linear. I mean, there was a little bit of foreshadowing, right? In the chapters before, like I mentioned earlier. Any writer is gonna have a little bit of nonlinear in their text, especially a really good fiction author. So, and they're gonna do that because flashbacks, foreshadowing, subplots, parallel plots add to the story. It gives the reader something other than just, this is what happened. It's, oh yeah, I remember that ... what I wanted to hear from you, that Izuku said before, and you're just like, what, why even include that? That's completely pointless. And we all have been like finally figuring out that moment later on and being like, ah, that's what was happening. And also, it explains scenes a little bit better. Like, Harry could have been like, I'm a wizard? Okay, that makes sense. And flash back to the zoo scene or the letter scene and being like, oh yeah, I remember these things happening. But that didn't happen. These are both really good ways to write. And nonlinear is crazy and weird, but it really makes for a better story. So, as you continue to read your novels at home, or as you continue to read My Hero Academia, or if you decide to pick up Harry Potter for the first time, think about linear versus nonlinear. Think about what it adds to the story. Yeah, so have fun with that.